Welcome to the Big Idea podcast, where we focus on food. Today, we're going to be talking to the CEO and co-founder of Fisheroo. Fisheroo is a company from Singapore focused on cell-based fish and seafood. Really interesting company. Recommend you stick around and listen to the conversation. At the end, love to get your questions and comments. Please do like and subscribe. And that's it. Let's get into the conversation. Thank you. Aaron from Fisheroo, welcome to the Big Idea podcast, where we focus on food. How are you, sir?
Hey, Andrew. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Awesome. I see this Zoom background that looks super manufactured. Is this real? Are you actually sitting in a proper lab today, or is this a manufactured background to make you seem really intelligent and scary?
Right. I'm actually currently in lab now because, we are running time point experiments at this point in time. So, yeah, it's real.
It's real. Hoo-ah.
Yeah.
My background is real too. Time point experiments. We'll get there in a minute because we'll go straight down a rabbit hole and people will be super confused. Why don't we start with Fisheroo? Fisheroo is your company. You guys started this business a little while ago.
Yep.
Tell us what Fisheroo does.
Yep. So Fisheroo is a cultivated fish company, and we are based in Singapore. And in fact, we are Southeast Asia's first cell-based fish company focusing on surimi. So we are currently in our R&D phase, and we are guided by our mission to redefine the norms of seafood production. And by doing so, we envision to be able to provide consumers like you and I sustainable, authentic, and nutritious cultivated fish products in the near future.
So, cultivated fish company cultivated fish company. Let's break that down a little bit for people that might be coming to this sort of subject for the first time. Cultivated fish, what does that mean?
Right. So cultivated fish, in fact, is actually also known as cell-based fish. So we produce fish meat using cell-based technology.
Fish meat, cell-based technology. So that's why you're in a lab.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so is this something for people to be nervous about? I mean, it doesn't look very fishy to me, or maybe it does look very fishy, depending on which use of the term you use. But it doesn't look very fishy to me. I'm not sure I like the idea of fish created in a lab. Explain why this is not something to be nervous about, or maybe it is something to be nervous about.
Right. So in fact, using cell-based technology on fish, what we do is actually grow the fish cells in a nutrition broth. And this nutrition broth is actually a mixture of carbohydrates, proteins, and many essential nutrients that are found already in fish. So what happens is we are replicating fish outside of the fish body in a man-made tank. So that is the whole idea of cultivated fish product. Yeah.
Great. So multiplying fish cells using a broth of carbohydrates and so on, making them multiply.
Yep.
Probably worth saying that your environment is sterile. In other words, you guys are creating cells in an incredibly clean, sterile environment when fish are growing, whether it's through aquaculture or out in the wild before they're caught. They could be eating microbeads, microplastics, mercury. I mean, you tell me what are the risks of eating traditional fish versus growing the fish in a sterile environment like this?
Right. So fish in the natural environment, they are exposed to a huge amount of metal mercury, microplastics, like you mentioned, and also parasites. So over the past 40 years, parasites found in raw fish has actually increased by a factor of 283 times. And that's a huge number right there. So what we are doing here with cell-based technology is to grow fish in a really aseptic, or rather a clean environment. So they are they would not be exposed to harmful substances like the metal mercury, microplastics, or even parasites.
So no microplastics, no mercury, no parasites in a clean environment. We used to call this sort of technology clean meat or clean seafood. We had to stop that because the traditional seafood industry, the traditional meat industry got all sort of uptight and bent out of shape, that we were suggesting that their approach wasn't clean. But, when you're slaughtering animals in an abattoir on the meat side, and you're dealing with blood and feces and cross-contamination, all sorts of other things, there's an argument that it isn't at its core a clean approach, and this when you guys are growing this sort of meat in clean environments, it's quite legitimately called clean meat.
Yep, that's right.
So tell us where you're at. Is this just a big experiment right now, or is this a company?
Right. So currently we are pretty early on in the R&D phase, where we have actually been able to develop a proprietary cell line in our facility here in Singapore. So we are very excited for what's to come. So currently we are going to push these cell lines into a stage of stability before we move into different phases of development, be it the cell media formulation, be it the scaffolding, and then the bioreactor. Okay,
so again, I'm going to ask you to break a lot of these things down for the folks who are new. Cell line, what do you mean by you've developed a cell line?
Right, so we have isolated cells from a particular fish species that we are looking at, and we have been able to grow them in a culture medium, and they have been able to grow well over the course of the period that we have been observing.
So you don't randomly just choose any regular fish and take its cells and then try and grow it. You're quite educated and sort of focused on what types of fish, what species of fish, maybe even where the cells are taken from on the fish, so that you can grow cells that do a good job. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, that's right. So we have specifically chosen a fish that is really popular within the Southeast Asian region, and it commands a pretty high price point. So yes, it holds really good economic value in that sense. And so we have internally as well, we have also validated that fish as a potential candidate for surimi production. So we are taking this long term, so to ensure that at the end of the day, after the cell-based fish meat is created, it will be well utilized by classic surimi product manufacturers all over the world.
Fantastic. So choosing a cell line which has more value, which is more aspirational, which a kind of fish that is paid, people pay a good price for. Yep. Makes sense. Where are you at from a production perspective? You mentioned that your early days, it's a cell line, etc. When do you think, or how long do you think it will take you to get to the point where you'll have a product per se?
Right. So we're actually looking towards a prototype within the next 12 months. So that's where we'll be growing the cells in the bioreactor. And so, so 12 months is the timeline that Fisheroo is internally looking at.
So 12 months, that's every time I talk to companies in the cell-based space, they talk about, 2023, 2024, and this was, a year ago. So you guys are talking about 12 months. That's pretty impressive. You mentioned bioreactor. I just want to make sure, just again, for those people who are coming to this for the first time, you said the cell line is being grown in a bioreactor. That sounds that sounds pretty scary. Tell us what that actually means.
Right. So the bioreactor is actually a stainless steel, kind of like a bucket, where it is like a container which allows cells to grow. It kind of stimulates the perfect environment where cells are able to grow. Yeah.
Okay, so I've seen containers like that in beer breweries and things like that. Big stainless steel, containers where they do all of the brewing and keep everything in a specific environment. Is that basically what we're talking about here? You're calling it a bioreactor, but It's a stainless steel, container where everything goes into and grows.
Yep, it's kind of like a similar concept. It has, I guess many more other sensors to ensure that the cells are growing well, and it tells us a lot of different other metrics. So it ideally is the same concept, but actually, there are some differences in that aspect. Yeah.
Got it. And again, it's a 100% clean environment, so that's another kind of positive. All of the sort of downsides of traditional seafood is taken out of the equation in this case. So how is it that you guys are talking about 12 months to have a product, and others in the kind of cell-based clean meat space are talking about years of production?
Right. So for us, we have actually built up an ecosystem of different collaborators within the different value chains, and that includes the different growth factors, the different FBS replacement, scaffolds, and bioreactor systems. So once the cell line is ready, we are going to pull all of the collaborators together, and based on our internal projections, we are looking at about 12 months, but that's only a prototype. So that's not a product that we are going to sell yet at this point in time. Yeah.
And you say prototype in 12 months. Is that proof of concept, or have you already arrived at proof of concept?
Well, that would be categorized as a proof of concept for fishery, yes.
Okay, so 12 months to proof of concept, and then is there a time period by which you would step change that proof of concept to be able to create fish in a quantity that could be sold?
Yep. So for commercialization wise, Fisheroo is looking at 2025, where we'll be selling small scale, where we'll be selling surimi to classic surimi product manufacturers and also plant-based companies at a rather small scale. We are looking at a low double-digit tons. Yep.
Okay, and this is going to be based in Singapore?
Yep. So we are starting first with Singapore, and then we'll expand to the Southeast Asian region before going to the Asia Pacific region. Yeah.
Okay, so give me a kind of feel for that. In the next couple of years, Singapore?
Yep. So 2025 would definitely be Singapore, and perhaps also the Southeast Asian region if we are able to produce sufficient quantity. Yep. And then in 2027 will be the entire Asia Pacific region, because by 2027 we are also actually looking at potentially a cost parity towards conventional surimi.
What would it take? I mean, you mentioned 2025 for commercial scale in kind of low double digits of tons. Is that monthly, or that's monthly, right?
That's actually yearly. So we are looking at yearly production. Yeah.
Okay. So what would it take, or what would be the inputs, or is it not that simple to actually get to that kind of volume sooner than 2025?
Right. I guess there are definitely some challenges within the industry, and one of the challenges would be on getting it down to cost. So for things like the growth factors, they are currently in pharmaceutical grade, which is super expensive. And so we are moving that into the food grade to reduce cost. And of course, the lack of development in fish in the biomedical industry. So we are unable to bring the knowledge from the biomedical industry into the cell-based industry. So there needs to be some sort of understanding of the fish species first before we can trailblaze the R&D development.
So the key bottleneck of scaling seafood production from a cell-based perspective is the growth factor. The fact that the growth factor right now is A, expensive because it's pharmaceutical grade, and B, focused on terrestrial or mammalian cells versus seafood cells.
Yep. And I guess there are many other challenges as well. Things like the bioreactors, things like the scaffold, they are all really costly items at this point in time. So I guess for the industry as well, and for Fisheroo as well, we are all looking to bring that cost down as we move forward. And for us at Fisheroo, we see 2025 being the year at which we are able to sell a product that's acceptable to consumers.
So on the podcast, we had a conversation with a company called Biftec, Biftec, who are working on growth factors. And for those people listening, that basically means the mix that the cells are put in so that the cells will multiply. They've been working on a plant-based growth factor now for quite some time. We invested in those guys a couple of years ago. I know there are other folks as well that are really aggressively moving away from FBS or fetal bovine serum as that growth factor. Are none of them tackling the seafood space right now, or you just haven't necessarily found a company that has that sort of non-FBS based growth factor?
Right. I think there are some developments towards creating serum replacement for the seafood industry, but for majority of them, I guess they are targeting the terrestrial animals, right? And they are providing bovine sequences at this point in time. So there's still some time before they create, fish specific growth factors for the seafood industry. Yeah.
So is that something that you guys are sort of tackling as well, or are you relying upon these partnerships that you mentioned before to solve different parts of this equation? I.e., you've got the cell lines. You're either working on or you're going to go find the growth factor, the bioreactors at scale. There are companies out there that have bioreactors at scale that you guys could probably use. So I'm not sure the bioreactor is one of the bottlenecks, is it?
Well, I guess for the industry standard now, everyone's using a fat batch bioreactor system, and definitely it works. But we see inefficiencies in fat batch bioreactor. So for Fisheroo, we are kind of exploring perfusion bioreactors that allows for continuous harvesting of cells at this point in time.
Okay, so when you say 2025 for production, if you're recreating the bioreactor, for example, and if you need to either build yourself or at least go find the non-FBS price competitive growth factor, I can see why it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason why we are putting it at 2025, and definitely our internal projections. And yeah, so these are all from internal projections that we have.
Now, Shock Meat, who are also in Singapore, one of the first movers in cell-based seafood or cultured seafood. I think they've been moving away from FBS pharmaceutical grade and FBS period. Do they have? I mean, are you collaborating with those guys? Have they found an equivalent to FBS, which is price competitive, so that's one of the blockers removed?
Right. So we have actually not collaborated with Shock Meat, but based on their website and based on conversations with them, I believe they actually do have a FBS replacement that they are already using, but the details wise, I'm not particularly sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we invested in those guys as well. So I mean, you should talk to Christian about seeing if there's some kind of partnership or collaboration or something around that, because if that's a major financial blocker for you, maybe you can source it from them. Maybe you can buy that from them if they produce it in decent enough quantities.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's definitely a collaboration that we would love to have, because like you mentioned, if it's a bottleneck, then yeah, we definitely have to solve it.
All right, let's take that offline and see if we can solve that one for you, or at least help. So now let's get into the company. Is it just Aaron sitting in a lab? Are you Fisheroo? Are you the entire team, or are there more of you?
Yep. So there's actually a total of 3 of us. So we are 3 co-founders, Nicholas and JB. So we actually hold different roles. I'm the CEO, and then we have a CSO and a COO who are both of my co-founders. Yeah. Fantastic.
So 3 co-founders. Are they all scientists, or is it you and one of the others that are scientists and another of the chaps is the business person? How does that work?
Yeah, actually, we are all three biologists by training. So we have a very experienced within the biomedical industry. And for Nicholas, our CSO, he actually also has experience in the biopharmaceutical industry. So yeah, we are all biologists. But for myself, having passion being a businessman, so I took on the role of CEO, and thus far, I've learned a lot within the industry. Yeah.
It's crazy because not everyone makes the transition from scientist to business person, and you're wearing both of the hats very, very well. I've seen you over the last sort of 6 months, and you've grown incredibly well into the role of CEO. I've got to say, I think you're doing a damn fine job, and I think you're going to continue to do so. So three of you started the company. What made you start the company? How did you sort of wake up in the morning and realize this was what you wanted to do, and you wanted to do it with these two other people?
Right. Yeah, that's a very great question. And I guess we have an upcoming blog post for that, but here I can share this here. So it starts with a question, a mission, and 3 visions. So a question being, so in the year of 2020, in the height of COVID in Singapore, I was actually asked a question from a friend of mine who introduced me to the idea of being a pescatarian. And being a great fish lover, I thought, why not? Because it's more of my favorite food and less of the other food that I don't really like. And so I decided to look up the internet on all things about pescatarian. And slowly as I keyed into Google, it started to show me things like mercury, microplastics, and all things about the fishing industry that aren't exactly good. And so I went down a rabbit hole of discovering different issues within the aquaculture and fishing industry, to which at that point in time I created a mission statement for myself, and that's to redefine the norms of seafood production. So thereafter, with this mission statement, I decided to look for co-founders, and that's where I met Nicholas and JB, who were then my co-founders at National Neuroscience Institute. And I found that they were very huge on the sustainable angle. And I, pitched the idea to them, and they loved it. And that's how we came together to create a vision for Fisheroo. So that's how one question, one mission, and 3 visions came about. And that's how we created Fisheroo. Yeah.
So a friend challenged you to become a pescatarian. You sort of started doing some research and realizing that if you were going to become a pescatarian, you might be giving yourself all kinds of contaminations and things. Okay, got it. Nicholas and JB, what were they doing before you guys came together and started discussing the idea? What were their roles? What were their lives all about?
Right. So we are all 3 biologists actually. So Nicholas and JB they were all working in the lab. So basically all 3 of us were working in the lab. And particularly for me and JB, we were working on Parkinson's disease using Drosophila melanogaster models, so fruit fly models. And for Nicholas, he was working under a separate PI, principal investigator, but still working on Parkinson's disease as well.
So the 3 of you were working on Parkinson's disease. That's incredible. And you stopped that to start growing fish.
Well, yes, you can kind of say that, because I was driven by my mission, or rather a new mission, to redefine the norms of seafood production.
I think that's fantastic. That's awesome. And so Fisheroo started. That was how long ago now?
We actually started ideating in, I guess April last year. We ideated, and then we officially incorporated in August in 2021.
Wow. So that's it's 4 months, 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, thereabout. Yeah.
August, September, October, November, December. 6 months. Sorry, I'm doing all my calendar math wrong. So your company's been formed for 6 months. You've been talking about it for basically 9 or 10 months. Tell us what the last 6 months has been all about.
Right. So the last 6 months has been amazing. We have met a lot of new people, but most importantly, in the lab, we have seen really great results coming out from our cell line. So that's what we are super excited about, and and that's the reason why we are confident that we are looking at the prototype in the year 2022. But definitely it's a big shift because, from working 8 hours a day to maybe 14 to 16 hours a day, it's definitely different. But it has been fulfilling for myself and my co-founders. And because we wake up every day knowing that we are doing something that's going to change the world for the better.
That's great. Okay, so 6 months, a lot of lab time. What about from a CEO business building perspective? You mentioned partnerships were important to Fisheroo's sort of success, helping you to break down barriers and so on. Are you finding the industry collaborative? How are you sort of broaching those potential partnerships?
Right. In fact, yeah, I guess the cell-based industry is one of the most collaborative industry that I've seen. People are willing to share what they are doing, and they are willing to collaborate, not just transactional, like buy this from me. They are willing to collaborate, and I'm very delighted in that sense because when the industry is collaborative, it is able to move things even faster. So yeah.
And you're based in Singapore. Singapore is one of the centers of sort of cell-based innovation, the first country to deregulate the production and sale of cell-based meats, etc., to for human consumption. Is the Singaporean government, the Singaporean environment helpful?
Yes, definitely. So because we have a full suite of ecosystem here, facilities, for example, like the lab I'm currently in, it allows us to develop our product smoothly, and the Singapore government is super supportive in the sense that there are many grants that we can apply for that will help us financially, and of course there are the strategic partners in Singapore that could help us in our R&D as well.
And they've got a government goal of being able to produce far more of their own food internally. So I know right now Singapore imports more than 90% of the food it consumes from outside, so from its neighbors and so on. 2030, they want to produce 30% of their own food. I think from discussions with them, your type of company, your type of technology is one of the key ways they think they're going to get there.
Yep, definitely. So in fact, by 2030, they are looking to produce 30% in Singapore, 20% of the local nutritional needs in Singapore, and through cell-based technology, because we are producing fish meat in Singapore, that will allow us to reach that goal by 2030.
Perfect. What do you need to grow your companies to the point where you can achieve your personal mission of sort of changing the seafood industry?
Right. Definitely one is talent. We need more talents within the industry to come in to join us on our mission to create, cell lines, to trailblaze development in the growth factors, bioreactors, and all the other value chains within the industry. Number two, there will be money. We definitely need more money to be able to conduct our R&D, get higher talents, and definitely the third one will be on advisors. We are looking for advisors actually at this point in time. So we are looking for advisors with diverse experience in the food industry, because for cell-based industry, we are essentially joining the food and the biomedical industry together. So we need advisors from both fields so we can better position ourselves moving forward.
So advisors, money, and talent, probably not in that order. If you were a person that was sort of interested in a similar mission, solving food production, solving the kind of seafood industry and how it's produced right now, etc. I don't want to sort of rag on those guys, but if your personal mission is to sort of reinvent the seafood industry, if I was interested in doing the same thing, if I was either a biologist or even just I put in sort of air quotes, just a business person, what should I do? How would you recommend I get involved in something like this? How do I pursue my personal mission if that was it, to start improving the food system?
Right. You can actually drop me an email at aaronchua@fisheroo.co, or you can visit our website to hit the contact us button. You can drop, and that would lead you to my email, and then we can take it from there. Yeah.
So you want to help the whole world's people who are wanting to solve this problem as well. You'd seriously step up to sort of guide them and point them in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. If they are interested in this industry, and over the past 6 months, I've actually met a lot of different people. So I could definitely help them in my small way, one way or another. Definitely, yeah.
Awesome. Give us that email again, Aaron. So AARON dot Chua CHUA.
No, so it's AARON CHUA at
one. So first word, first name, second name together at fisheroo.com. So I'm going to make that really slow for people who are sort of poised with pens over pads. AARON CHUA at Fisheroo, which is FISHAROO.com.
Right, it's actually .co. Yeah, so it's
.co.
Yeah.
Does somebody own the .com of Fisheroo?
Yeah, they actually do.
That sucks. Oh my god. Okay, what are they doing with that? I should go check that out. I thought you guys were .com at least. All right, I'll go figure that out later. If you own fisheroo.com and you're not doing anything with it, you should contribute it to Aaron, because these guys are changing the world for the better. Okay, so anyone's interested in getting involved in this space in any regard, they can reach out to you. Are you on LinkedIn, by the way?
Yep, definitely. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram, actually. So you can head on to the Fisheroo Instagram webpage, and you can drop us a message there, and I'll be there to respond to you.
So knowing what you do, I'm kind of wondering why you're on Instagram. Is it like, this is Aaron in the lab selfie, this is Aaron in the lab selfie from a different direction, this is Aaron at midnight in the lab? Like, how given how much time you guys are working, what are you doing with Instagram?
Right. So we are actually rolling out a edutainment marketing, where we are looking to create comics involved or rather infused with the ideas of cell-based technology, and we're going to push it out to the masses so that people know and educate the consumers so that they are assured that cell-based food is actually safe, it's actually sustainable, and it's something that they can look out for.
Comics.
Yes, that's right. Comics.
Aaron, we've got to be involved in this. This sounds fabulous. This sounds like just the kind of thing that we need out there. So you have like graphic designers and things creating artwork for like education around cell-based?
Yep. So we actually have a freelance designer who happens to be my brother. So it's the one drawing, and I'm the one, creating the content.
He doesn't happen to be your brother. He just happens to be my brother. Okay, so he's making comics around education, for like entertainment education around cell-based. That's amazing. Please let us get that out to people and get involved. I'd love to help with that. Okay, so anyone's interested in this space from a career perspective, they should reach out to you. You mentioned money, you mentioned advisors. And one interesting thing, you mentioned advisors who are both either from the food industry, but also from the biomedical, because on the cell-based side, you're sort of taking very tried and tested technologies that have been used in the biomedical space for decades, and you're transferring it, and other people are transferring it through to the food space, which have not necessarily used these approaches for decades. So it's a blending of two incredibly interesting industries. Where do you see the advisors, the mentors coming from? What kind of people have you already engaged with around this?
Right. So we have actually spoken to some of the professors in the universities who are actually working on the alternative protein space. That's one avenue. And the other avenue would be the mentors that Big Idea Ventures has actually introduced us to. So these are the two huge avenues that we are speaking to and looking for advisors, mentors in that regard.
How are you finding the traditional seafood industry? Are they sort of grabbing hold of this technology? Are they interested in it? Are they scared of it? Do they see this as a threat or as an opportunity, or both, maybe?
Well, I guess they see this as an opportunity based on my initial conversations with them. But I guess they are rather skeptical in the sense that not many prototypes have been out there yet, and I guess there's no commercial product at this point in time. So they remain skeptical, but they are excited for what we have to bring to the table.
It's interesting because what we're talking about here is changing the fundamentals of an entire industry. And so when people sort of look at the technology and say, wow, 2025, that's far away. We're in 2022 when this is being recorded. But 3 years to fundamentally change the origins or the foundations of an entire industry doesn't sound like a long time. It does sound like a long time in terms of keeping the company funded. That's a scary proposition that, it's going to take 3 years for you guys to get to revenues unless you find an alternative revenue source. But to fundamentally change a trillion/billion dollar plus industry globally with an entirely new technology just seems like 3 years seems like the snap of the fingers.
Yep, that's right. Yeah. In fact, I guess in the regard, while we want revenue as soon as possible, we have to make it acceptable to consumers, especially in the cost area, and of course, in the rather education area. So this is something that we are working huge on. So cost being the R&D side, and education being the Instagram side. Yeah.
Do you see governments being interested and involved in this kind of technology? It seems to me that if I was a government looking to feed a growing population in any part of the world, being able to create, seafood in clean environments onshore, in commercial environments, in buildings, for example, versus having to fish for depleting, fish offshore, just seems to be something government should really be interested in and supporting. It seems to be, from my point of view, the future of how we're going to feed our people.
Yep, that's right. So I guess the Singaporean government is one of the most the best example because they are super supportive in that area. They are actively engaging the different companies within Singapore to kind of understand the technologies that they have, and also to let them understand the government standpoint on whether we can commercialize our product at the end of the day. Because there are some concerns such as genetic modification that they are looking into, and also on the other hand, they also have grants that we can apply to accelerate our R&D efforts, in terms of financial wise. Yeah.
Do you see anything being a significant, apart from the 3 years that you mentioned, do you see there being a significant potential barrier to this industry?
I guess the barrier would be getting to scale. The hardest challenge would be scaling up to a commercial level, because I guess for now we are all growing on a very small scale, and so the amount of cells you require is rather small. And if you are looking at a 10,000 liter bioreactor, the amount of cells that you require in that tank would be much exponentially higher as compared to today. So that would be the largest barrier moving forward.
I'm gonna potentially disagree with you. I think with the right advisors, with a decent amount of funding, that is a math problem. It sounds weird to talk about science as a math problem, but I think it's solvable. I think it may not be 2 years, it may be 3 years, it may not be 3 years, it may be 4 years. But I think having a team like you, JD, Nicholas, working on this, I think it's solvable, and I think other companies working on it too, it's solvable. I personally think one of the biggest barriers is the getting consumers to accept it as the new way of producing and eating food. There's something sort of romantic about the idea of fishermen, fish people on a boat with a boat running out into the ocean and catching something that's been wild and sort of harvested. And I'm not sure people really understand that the seafood industry, the amount of seafood out there is depleting. We're sort of catching these things to extinction, and it's just not sustainable as our population grows. And I think so personally, I think you guys, I think the industry, I think it's a math problem that will be solved. I think that the toughest thing is going to be getting people to want to, take the food in this new way and consume it. Now, the great thing is, I think the clean angle, the fact that it's such a clean environment, no contaminants, no microplastics, no mercury, no parasites. I think that is really important, that people are getting really good quality, clean food.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's definitely the goal, and definitely like you mentioned. So it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. So in terms of commercialization, so definitely, and so this is why we are also working hard in terms of educating the consumers so that they are aware of what we are producing, because ideally we don't want a black box where people don't really understand what you are doing and you expect them to consume it. So yeah.
You mentioned funding being the third thing. So you said advisors, talent, and funding. What kind of folks are interested in funding these kinds of companies, these kinds of projects? Who are you? What kind of folks are you talking to? What kind of folks do you want to talk to allow you to grow Fisheroo?
Right. So we are actually in talks with many different investors. And I guess most of them, they are really mission driven, and they are long-term investors in the sense that they understand that time is required for us to get the cell-based food into the market at great cost, and definitely they themselves are mission driven in the sense that they are all about sustainability. So these are the kind of investors that we love to work with, in the next 3 to 5 years, and in the very long, in the future. Yeah.
And I think that's perfect. You should really be looking for investors who align with your mission and your motivations. For folks listening who are potential investors, I wasn't joking about how this is building the fundamentals of a new industry or a new way of producing food in what is a $1 trillion industry, i.e. seafood, meat, etc. If you could have invested in Silicon Valley when it was just starting, you would probably be a wealthy person at this point. So not only is there an opportunity for investors to get involved in sustainable food and a better way of producing food in a clean way for the environment, but I personally believe there's a lot of wealth creation opportunity here as well, because you're getting in at the very beginning of a whole new industry, which is not just a small industry. We're not talking about an industry that's worth $1 billion here. We're talking about an industry that's worth multi-billions of dollars. So if there are investors out there that want to talk to you, Aaron, or Fisheroo, we'll go back to the whole Aaron Chua at fisheroo.co.
Yep,
we'll go back to LinkedIn where they can find you as well. Your last name is spelled Chua, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. Last thoughts, if you wanted to sort of get a key message out there about Fisheroo, apart from how you came up with the name, and I'd love to hear that story. Is there a last message that you want to get out to people listening, whether it's advisors, investors, or talent, or anyone else really?
Yep. So for anyone who is really interested in the sustainable angle in the cultivated fish, rather cultivated meat space, do follow us on Instagram, because we'll be rolling out many different contents, to outreach to you guys, and yeah, keep a lookout for that. And for Fisheroo wise, our name is actually, I was actually inspired by a CEO of a US insurance company, where he mentioned that a 3 syllables brand have a larger impact in the minds of consumers. So that's how I decided to go for a 3 syllables brand, and that we were talking about many different names, and it hit me that the Fisheroo brand is kind of fun, gimmicky, and it's easy to remember, and that's how we got to it. Yeah,
it is very easy to remember. One thing though, it reminds me of a game that we used to have when I was growing up called Buckaroo. And you would have a plastic horse, and you would hang different plastic things on it, like a rope and things like that. And if you nudged the horse too much, it would buck and throw everything off, and and then you would lose the game, and it was called Buckaroo. So that's what it reminds me of. I don't know if it's an American game or just in England. I'd have to go check that out. Okay, rambling enough. Everyone who is listening, thank you so much for your time. I've been talking today with Aaron Chua, Chua from Fisheroo. He and Nicholas and JB are doing some incredible things in the cell-based seafood industry. Aaron, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Andrew. It was a great pleasure speaking to you.
Awesome. So this is Andrew from Big Idea Podcast, where we focus on food. Signing off. I'm waving. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Fisheroo and its co-founder. Please do reach out to them or us. This is Andrew, your host from Big Idea Ventures, and this is the Big Idea Podcast, where we focus on food. Hope you enjoyed the conversation again. Please do like, subscribe, and add any questions or comments below, assuming there's a below. All right, thanks very much. Bye-bye.